Hi guys, welcome back to another video. So as I changed the grip on my pencil, I am scrolling down all the way to my OC folder because I wanted to take a look again at my reference sheets that I ended up doing for my OC Masaki. So in the past, I did, I think, a video for each one of my OCs. Like they had a dedicated video of me working on their reference sheet. And I've talked about how for reference sheets nowadays, I prefer doing them more in my sketch page kind of layout, where I let the kind of like drawings overlap each other. And they do have like a specific pattern to the majority of them. I like to have the chibi and a kind of like full headshot of the character on the very first sketch page. And then on the second sketch page, I have more of like a simplified full body and any other doodles on that one. But I noticed for Masaki's, as I was making the little character profile things, I guess, for my characters on Artfight, I did not really like some of the drawings that I did for Masaki's little reference sheet. Now, the reason that I didn't like it as much compared to some of my other attempts at my OC's reference sheets in the past is mostly because the faces on both of the sheets just look more inconsistent across the board compared to the rest of my OCs. So apologies to Masaki, but I wanted to see if I could almost like redo my main sheet in a way. So I am going to be following a similar format to that. And like I mentioned, I like to include like a larger headshot of the character to kind of be like my focal point, and typically is the one that I render the most out of this page. And then I like to have a full body chibi, and then any doodles can kind of like join the rest of the page wherever they want, just to kind of fill up the space and add a little bit more context to the character or details. But later on, I end up not using this one to replace my main reference sheet. I still think I didn't really do Masaki justice. I don't know why I've been struggling to draw him more recently. Doodling him typically is fine, or I'm doing like a one-off illustration, it's been fine. But when I really like sit down to make more of like a reference sheet for him, for some reason I just don't like any of the drawings that I ended up doing. But instead of kind of like treating it as like a replacement for the previous ones that I've done, I'm just gonna add this on to the rest of my reference sheets, which is kind of like the thing that I wanted to make. Kind of the main purpose of making it more like a sketch page is that I can kind of like, if I only want to send 2 reference sheets of my characters, I can kind of like pick and choose different ones if I want to. So eventually, in the future, I would like to make like subsequent pages for each of my OCs and just keep adding onto them, and then always including like the main particular reference, and then have any add-ons later on, and I can just like kind of loop them all together, and they kind of share the same color palette, share the same aesthetic, and it just looks kind of more cohesive in a way, even though I don't really like any of the faces that I've drawn Masaki on the previous ones that I worked on, like, you know, the older video, I guess. So right now I am doing kind of like a time-lapse version for the majority of the sketching portion. And typically I don't do this. I like to do real-time footage if my hand is kind of like on the screen, if that makes sense, just because I feel like sometimes it gets a little bit too distracting or kind of dizzying when my hand is kind of like darting back and forth. But I wanted to include the majority of the sketching because I have the most footage of it. So when I was making this particular reference sheet, I think it was the night before Artfight actually started, and I was kind of doing this last minute, and when I decided to change my mind about how I wanted to treat the sketch page once again, or like the purpose of this reference sheet, it kind of took me a little bit too long, and Artfight already started, so now I'm not as compelled or like feel as rushed to finish this particular sheet. And because of that, I had too many interruptions throughout the I guess the July 1st, as well as the last day of June. I did not have enough time to fully record at my desk. So a part of the rendering portion is going to be skipped because I did not have the time. So apologies about that. But I'm going to show the majority of the sketching, and then I will show you kind of like bits and bobs of me doing the rendering. And I think majority of like the rough coloring is also kind of shown for the most part, but we'll do that in like normal real time instead. But I think in the future, whenever I do any added kind of like sketch page reference sheets for any of my rest of my OCs, or I want to do one of Masaki once again, I'm going to take my time doing them and not make it for like a video or have it on a deadline. I think when that happens, I do feel too pressured and I start to take a lot of shortcuts and, kind of shorten the process a little bit. So there's a lot of things that I have gripes about this one in particular as well. So I would like to do another sheet at least for Masaki once again, and then kind of iron out a little bit more of his outfit and maybe do like a backside as well, since this one and the main very first one that I've done in the past already has kind of like the focal point being his face, and then I have the second sheet that has more of like the front view. I think we can do like one more page of him and then have like a full body of like the back or the side or something, and then other doodles around it. And I think that's kind of fun just to have more sheets of them in the same kind of format. Like I mentioned, I kind of just like the fact that it looks more cohesive if I were to send this to a commissioner in the future or something like that. I just think this aesthetically looks kind of nicer. But by the time I'm doing this voiceover, since it is a little bit on the later end, the kind of like the first day of Artfight is already over and I have been just having a lot of fun. So I did see that there's a few submissions or like attacks on my profile. So I will definitely try my best to do some revenges here and there. But like I mentioned on my profile, I am going to be prioritizing attacks and friendly fires of like a lot of the characters that I already have saved, or like just whatever I have planned a little bit later. But for the most part, revenges are going to be like seldomly done, but I'll try my best to acknowledge everybody who has like drawn any of my characters, either via on my Instagram, I'll post them to my stories, or I will be commenting obviously just to make sure that I didn't miss it or anything like that. But I cannot guarantee a revenge. So if you're interested in Artfight, I highly recommend just looking it up or watching a bunch of videos that people have made talking about like the gist of Artfight, or like, Artfight for beginners or something like that. Because when I started doing more research back in kind of like mid-June, that's kind of like when I got more gung-ho about wanting to really join Artfight this year. I've always heard Artfight just kind of like floating around in the artist space just in general on social media, and I knew the general premise, but I feel like there's so many little bits and bobs to know before getting like fully involved. That's kind of like better to do research about prior to joining. So highly recommend, do your research, follow the rules, and just have fun, and hopefully you draw like a bunch of people's OCs, because I think that's kind of like the main fun part about it, is gifting OCs to, other fellow artists. But let's jump back in and talk a little bit more about the coloring portion. So kind of like following the similar format, I, at the very beginning, already changed the canvas color to be kind of more of this sandy manila-ish color. It's going to look different every so often just because I do fiddle with the lighting on my camera or in my room to hopefully get a better color match to my screen. But it doesn't really work out sometimes, so sometimes the background might appear warmer or lighter or more yellow or more orange, so I do apologize about that. But you'll kind of see the color at the very end because I like to show the time lapse as well as the final image, so hopefully there's a more accurate color then. Then, just kind of make the background a little bit less boring, I like to add a grid pattern at the very back. It kind of gives it more like that sketchbook vibe as well, or like grid paper, so I think it kind of lends itself to more of like a doodly, sketchy type of format. So I like adding that kind of patterning, and then we move on to color. So I've already blocked in all the Masakis with the kind of like color fill option with the selection tool, but I want to keep my colors fairly accurate. So I'm going to go ahead, open up my old reference sheet, and then paste that into our canvas. I'm going to take just the one headshot of Masaki and place him near the main kind of focal point of our sketch page, which is the larger one in the center, and we're just going to color pick from this kind of like pasted image. I don't remember if other people have expressed that they've had this similar kind of issue with Procreate. So the fact that I color pick from the reference window, I often find it makes my colors slightly darker and I think slightly duller. So the saturation will be slightly off, as well as just like the general value of it. And because of that, I feel like the desaturation does throw me off a little bit, and I prefer to have like, consistent colors for the most part for all of my OCs and their own pages. So instead of using the reference tool, I ended up just opening the image, pasting the kind of like any image that has like the majority of his colors present and just pasting it, and then we can just color pick directly from our canvas rather than from our reference sheet, or not reference sheet, the reference window, reference tool that Procreate basically has already, already installed into its program. So I prefer to do it this way just for more color accuracy. Otherwise, I would be eyeballing colors if I need to, or if I really didn't care, I could just like color pick from the reference window and it wouldn't really matter because it's like kind of minimal, but I definitely did notice it when I accidentally started to use it a lot more in terms of trying to keep colors consistent. So yeah, just be a little bit wary. I'm not too sure if it was ever fixed, but I've been just avoiding it for the most part. So initially when I was doing the coloring for our new sheet, I ended up blocking in and filling in the new skin tone color because I made mine extremely more, I guess, like yellow and pale, and he's a little bit more on the pinkier side compared to what I've initially put down. After that, I started to pick some of the shadow colors to warm up his face, and I started to apply that to all of the Masaki drawings on my page, but it was a little bit slow chunking them in one by one like this and having what the kind of like reference image basically be in the way of my coloring. So tried my best to block out majority of the larger one so that we could eventually get rid of our little pasted image and just color pick from our main one instead. So that's what I ended up doing. Also, like I said in the beginning, I guess, I was kind of rushing towards a certain part of this, and I think it's like right around here when I was coloring in this Masaki on the very right, that I started taking shortcuts, leaving things very blobular, not super clean, which makes it a little bit harder for me when it comes to cleanup and rendering because it'll just take more time if I want something to read very crisp and clean, I guess, or a little bit more refined looking. So I do think the rest other than my main Masaki will look very rough in terms of the coloring. I think I cleaned up enough so that they don't read like they haven't been rendered technically, but there's definitely some areas that read either more flat, or I just darkened up some lines and scribbled in some contrast, but like a lot of my sketchy lines might be still present. I think I still like the idea of kind of like treating this still as like a sketch page, so not making it like full render like I do with some of my old ones, where maybe it follows the same format of like almost collaging the drawings in a way, but some of them are like so fully rendered and cleaned up that I wouldn't consider it a sketch per se. I think it's just like the initial idea of like the way how I laid out these sketches that I usually considered it a sketch page. But this one's a little bit more akin to like having more unfinished drawings versus like, having everything polished and clean. So while I'm doing kind of like the drawing portion, and I'll kind of like briefly explain it, after I blocked in our main color for our skin, and I've like, used the lasso tool, used the color fill tool, I will then alpha lock it, and then I can do all the rough coloring, which is what I'm doing right now. And I don't really have to worry about exiting or, having the lines, or not the lines, my colors kind of go beyond where I placed my flat color initially. After that, we go back to our sketch, which is what I'm doing right now, alpha locking it and then changing the color slowly and trying to match it to be a little bit softer. Oftentimes I do make the face a lot warmer at this point, but hopefully not too orangey red so that I have a lot to cover up a little bit later. But I will try my best to match it to make things look a little bit softer so that we can move on to our effects if I wanted to, or just merging my layers and then rendering and cleaning up on top. Last but not least, because I'm on kind of like the cleaning up and rendering phase, and this is pretty much the majority of the rest of the video until the very end where I put a white border or like little doodles at the very end, or maybe I'll add text or whatever at that point. But let me talk a little bit about artfight again. I did mention that on, I think, Monday's video. It would have been the first time I've told you guys that I was doing artfight. People on Instagram already knew because I posted a lot of my progress, I guess, on like in terms of making my profile, uploading characters and all that, and just like my learning experience of just navigating the website for the most part. But day one has been very fun. I've been glad to see that some people like my OCs enough to want to draw them. There's a few people that I follow that also follow me that I want to do revenges of for sure. And just some other ones that I definitely got as well because you guys are very speedy on day one. I think last I've checked, I have 6 for my OCs. There's a lot for, I think it's Masaki and Akemi. I'm kind of shocked that Akemi got quite a few just because like I don't draw him enough, so I'm not too sure if like people knew who he was or if it's just because maybe like his aesthetic a little bit more. So that's kind of fun and neat to see that him and Sato got some art of them right off the bat. So hopefully if you did like join Artfight and you did draw any of my OCs, please don't expect a revenge. I'll try my best to get to them when I can, but my goal is to do more finished and like cleanly rendered drawings for my attacks as well as like my friendly fires. I don't know how exactly I'm going to divvy it up for revenges because revenges will definitely have more people that I would like to draw for eventually just to kind of like pay it back, even though I know people said it's not necessary. But I don't want to be spending 3+ hours every time for each drawing because there's no way I can knock that many out. So I might kind of do like a variation on what I might be doing. So maybe I'll do like chibis or something. Maybe I'll do like just sketched headshots, or like maybe I'll do like the watercolor doodle kind of aesthetic or something, or maybe I'll just do like more selective fully colored ones. We'll see how I'll kind of like approach it, but I'm going to be learning a lot doing Artfight in terms of like it being my first time joining this kind of like art event. So I'm excited, as well as just I want to draw people's OCs, and luckily me doing them on stream as well as just like doing them in my own time hopefully will be a lot less pressure, because I think a lot of you guys noticed that I haven't done like a draw your OC video in a long time. Part of it is because like the selection process, I haven't found a way that's like a better way to kind of like filtering out certain characters, because there's a lot of the ones that people have submitted like super long time ago and then they are not aware that I'm currently making a new video, so I probably have to keep revamping a new hashtag every time. But the main reason is like I don't want to draw people's characters super incorrectly and not have like further information, if that makes sense. So Artfight is kind of fun because people tend to give blurbs or like their okays on like I guess like your do's and do nots. So I feel just more comfortable and a little bit more freeing not to have to do it for a video. Streaming has been fun because it's just more like interactive drawing for the most part and just chatting with you guys while I kind of like mindlessly draw, if that makes sense. But back to the drawing. I did take like a gigantic break in between working on the giant Masaki. Ended up finishing the chibi as well as kind of like the closed-eyed version Masaki doodle at the very top, as well as the one on the very right off camera, just because I was out and about a little bit. But to kind of like finish off the page, I ended up putting a white border, adding some sparkles and doodles around some of the drawings, and I think that's it for our little page of Masaki. So kind of like scrolling down to match the previous pages. This is kind of like what they look like. I definitely ended up making the white kind of outline for this one a lot thicker compared to the previous ones, but I still think it looks kind of cute. Once again, I still have gripes about certain things about this page, but it was still nice to kind of like redraw Masaki once again. I definitely will return back to doing the redraws for the Genshin characters very soon, but I am also going to be returning back to the drawing your character suggestions because I've abandoned that series for too long, and the main reason was supposed to be the convention prep, but convention prep has been over for 2-3 months at this point, so I am going to be returning back to it and doing the, I think it's Bungo Stray Dogs is the one that I really wanted to do because a lot of you guys are fans of that show, even though I haven't watched it. But I think that's it for today's video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the session, and I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye! Also, if you already drawn my OCs during Artfight, thank you. I promise I'll get to commenting on people's posts and stuff very soon. I'm just a little swamped with a few things, but I'll get right into that as soon as I can. Okay, bye!